I'm Douglas Mason, CEO of Naturally Splendid, symbol NSP on the TSX Venture Exchange. Naturally Splendid is a biotechnology and consumer products company focused on the global cannabis and health markets. Naturally Splendid is expanding distribution in this rapidly growing market with products currently in Canada, the USA, South Korea, Germany, and Australia. To view our comprehensive company presentation and for more information, please visit our website at naturallysplendid.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Hilliard Macbeth, author of the second edition of the book When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash. He's also a portfolio manager and financial advisor in Edmonton. Welcome back to the show, Hilliard, and today you're talking to us from Vancouver.
Yeah, it's great to be out in Vancouver and looking out at the mountains, and the snow is still on the mountains and the sun is shining. When it's like this, Vancouver, you can't beat it.
Hilliard, you were one of the guest speakers at the 2019 Vancouver Housing Conference. What was the main message you had for them?
Well, I think I was on a panel with a couple of other people, and we were asked to talk about Alberta. So one of the things that people were asking about was, is the new government in Alberta going to turn things around? Because generally the people at the conference are pretty aware that things have been pretty poor in Alberta for quite a long time. So I had to tell them that really it's hard to imagine what Jason Kenney, Premier-elect, can do when you've got the situation that the U.S. Has become the top oil producer in the world. They've gone from 5 million barrels a day to 12 million barrels a day, ahead of Saudi Arabia, ahead of Russia. And they're now exporting 3 million barrels a day of oil. They import about 3.5 to 4 million barrels a day, depending on how you count it, from Canada, and almost all of that comes from Alberta. But they don't really need our oil as much as they used to. Now, there isn't going to change right away immediately because the refineries are set up to handle the heavier crude that comes from Alberta, from Fort McMurray. And the new oil they're discovering in West Texas, the Permian Basin, is very light, sweet oil, which the refineries are not equipped to handle. So it won't change right away. But the refining of the Texas oil is easier because it's not very complex. So eventually they'll be able to cut out the complex refineries or reduce the amount of refining that's needed. And then I imagine they'll still buy our oil, but the projections for Alberta we're supposed to be increasing to 5-6 million barrels a day with all the new oil sands plants. I just don't see that happening. So I talked about that a little bit, and then there were some developers there that were talking about Alberta in terms of new projects and stuff, and it's mostly purpose-built rental. It's now the condo craze appears to have ended, and single-family homes there's a huge glut of single-family homes in Alberta. There's something like 5,000 completed but not yet sold units in Alberta. That would include condos and single-family homes, and so they're not building them anymore, but they are building rentals. So we'll see how that works out. That could be a challenging economic project for the developers because rents have been pretty soft in Alberta for a while, but if they keep their costs under control, maybe they can make it work.
Well, I heard in Toronto, rents are now coming down.
You know, it's funny you should say that because I heard that at the conference on Tuesday. Now, it was about Vancouver, and the fellow had 15 years experience in his family company managing property, single-family homes, apartments, condos. They do everything. Big buildings with, lots of units. And he said, we're having trouble. He said, people are moving out. They're finding cheaper rent. They're leaving us and going to, he said, this has never happened before. This is the first time it's happened in his memory. And he said, we're having to reduce our rents a little bit. Now, usually what they do is they keep the rent the same, but they give incentives. They give 3 months free rent or something. But the net effect of that is rents, if you're talking 3 months free rent over 3 years, that's 1 month a year. That would be 8.5% reduction in the effective rent. So something's happening. It's certainly been happening in Alberta for a while, but now it's starting to happen in Toronto and Vancouver too.
One of the big banks reported that they didn't think millennials were leaving cities like Vancouver and Toronto to find cheaper accommodation. Are they, though? I mean, the banks might be the last to know.
Yeah, they're not likely to have that information. They're big, very big bureaucratic organizations, and as long as the mortgage payments and the credit card payments keep coming in, and so far they have, the banks won't find out. But people that are actually managing the buildings to rent them out, they hear about it right away because they see people leaving and they see what they have to do to keep the buildings full and stuff like that. But it's all about jobs. So, this is what we've kind of gotten away from, especially in Vancouver, with all of the foreign money and all the speculators and that. We've sort of lost touch with the fact, the basic facts are that real estate, whether it be renting or owning, is related to the number of jobs and how good the jobs are. And so as long as Toronto has good jobs, then people will stay there. And Vancouver, unfortunately, doesn't have as many high-paying jobs as like Manhattan or London, England, or Singapore. So the mismatch between the really expensive housing in Vancouver and the lack of really high-paying jobs is something that is going to be unsustainable. And we learned a lot about Vancouver real estate at the conference. There's some very big changes happening in the Vancouver housing market, especially at the very expensive end.
So what was your takeaway from the conference? What do people on the West Coast have to look forward to, if anything?
At the moment, West Vancouver, the British properties in West Van, is the epicenter of the housing crash that is now underway. So I was sitting beside a realtor at the conference, waiting to do my presentation, and he passed a listing to me. It was for a house that was bought in, let me get this straight now, 2016, January. So 3 years and 3 months ago, the guy paid $11.2 million. It's a huge house on a huge lot with a panoramic view of the Pacific Ocean in the British properties. Paid $11.2 million 3 years ago and sold this week for $5.5 million. And with taxes and real estate commissions, we calculated he probably lost $6 million on that. So it's just, I was just shocked. Like, it's just mind-blowing to think that now, the guy must have really desperately had to sell to take that big a loss, right? But there are really a very large number of homes listed. I think the number was 157 homes over $5 million listed in, that's all over Vancouver, but a lot of that would be in West Van and North Van. And they're only selling 1 or 2 a month. So at that rate, it'll take 10 or 20 years to sell all the homes. Of course, it won't work that way. What'll happen is the prices will come down and then they won't be over $5 million anymore. So if they reduce the price below $5 million, then there's fewer homes recorded as being for sale above $5 million. But not that long ago, there were 81 homes for sale above $8 million. So, and then the crazy thing about it, Jim, is that of those 81 homes, 72 of them are brand new. So some spec builder bought that place, tore down the old place, built a brand new house. I'm sure at considerable expense, and was trying to sell it for $8 million or higher. And I just don't understand it. Like I can't imagine having that much money for a house. But if I did, I'd want to hire the architect, and I'd want to call the shots as to what kind of home I got. But these were spec built, and you wonder if they have any chance at all of selling those places. So. And the thing that came out in the conference, there was a lot of private lenders there that were talking about the private lending business. And these are the people that end up financing those situations, because the banks are pretty reluctant to finance spec builders in the $5 and $8 and $10 million category. So they end up having to borrow their money at much higher rates from private lenders. And those loans only last 1 year. So at the end of the year, you have to pay the loan out, or you have to ask them to renew it, and they don't have to renew it. So it's and all of the private lenders are getting very, very leery of extending very much credit in this market because of the sales are at now this is for all, not just expensive homes, but for all homes. Sales are at in March we're at a 30-year low. Never been seen for 30 years. In April, isn't all the numbers aren't in yet, but it looks like April will be equally as slow. So when that happens, you know that there's some people that are over their head in debt and they desperately need to sell. And then now that we don't know what happens to them, they get foreclosed. Or so far, foreclosures are still ticking along at a very modest pace. So it hasn't shown up yet in the foreclosures, but it will pretty soon, I suspect.
We'll have more with Hilliard Macbeth right after this.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, Recycling Trade Publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Hilliard Macbeth. Hilliard, did the subject of money laundering come up at the Vancouver Housing Conference?
Yes, so Ben Rabideau, who organized the conference, invited Christine Duhome, and she is the lawyer who's basically best known for working on money laundering and anti-money laundering legislation in the file. And then Attorney General David Eby was there. And so David Eby showed us it was a video, which is the video that he got shown when he became Attorney General, of how people launder money through the casinos with the cash. So they actually showed the video of the guy getting out of the car with the shopping bags full of cash. They weren't hockey duffel bags. They were looked like shopping bags. And in the first transaction was like $200,000, and then the second one they showed inside there. They have a special VIP room where people with cash, you can go in. And they've got bigger bundles of cash, and this one was over $1 million worth of cash. And the camera showed them taking it out of the bag. It's just unbelievable. But apparently, the money laundering doesn't happen right at the front steps of the casino. The guy that takes the money inside the casino is buying money that's already been laundered, and the way it gets laundered is a transfer that happens offshore from one bank account to the other. So often these guys will go into the casino having bought this money, and they end up gambling it and losing it. So that's one of the reasons why the casinos didn't realize that they were facilitating money laundering, because they watched these guys and they just looked like gamblers that came in with lots of money, but walked out with very little. But it turns out that it's much more complex than that. So David Eby told the conference that the government of British Columbia is contemplating doing a public inquiry into how all this works. So they don't have all the answers yet. And a lot of the audience was questioning why doesn't there been more prosecutions? Why hasn't there been more police action? And one of the reasons was that a lot of the jurisdiction belongs with the federal government. So there's a limited amount of prosecution that the provincial government can do. So they're trying to cooperate with the federal government to try and get something going, maybe through the RCMP, but they're talking about an increase in the budget of $30 or $40 million to get some dedicated people onto this. That $30 or $40 million would pay for maybe a staff of 100 people to try and track some of this down. But Mark Cohodes was there, and he was talking to David Eby. I think most of your viewers probably know who Mark Cohodes is. He's a California-based hedge fund guy, and he likes to dabble in Canada. His famous saying he made right at the outset was, "Canada is a banana republic." So he's very controversial.
Well, you know, what he said is obvious. And yes, Christine and Mark have been guests on my show. And to them, it's so obvious that it's happening. And this excuse that, oh, well, we don't have federal funding. Honest to God, the RCMP is spending a fortune and a lot of time dressing up bears and arresting them and having fake frog patrols and fish looking for poachers. Why don't they put the same kind of time and money and effort into looking after money laundering? Because essentially If you nail the criminals, you get their funds. The investigations pay for themselves, and if you do it right, the taxpayer wins. Well, there's obviously a lack of political will here. And again, I'm starting to think more Canadian politicians are corrupt than we really thought initially. Like, who is being paid off so they don't investigate?
Well, it is true that a lot of these people that are bringing the money in from offshore are heavy contributors to everybody's political campaign. So it is confusing for the politician to have to go and confront them in an investigation. And that's why a public inquiry would work better, because then you appoint some independent head of the inquiry, and he goes off, and then it sort of takes some of the pressure off of the governments in terms of having to investigate.
Hilliard, one thing that's been successful is Revenue Canada will give you a 15% bounty on whatever you turn in. If you find a coworker is fleecing the taxpayer or a company, they'll give you a 15% finder's fee. Why not have a 15% finder's fee for money laundering? I'm sure there are crooks who would gladly turn in their fellow criminals.
It's a great idea. And the other thing I didn't get a chance, but the idea I had, I've read about this thing called source of funds audit. So what you do is somebody that has a big house, seems to be very wealthy with a Rolls Royce or something. It is possible, and it happens in many countries, where the CRA would come in and say, okay, show us how you acquired all this money. Like we see from our records here that your income is only $10,000 a year. So explain to us how you have, a $10 million house in British properties and a $2 million car. And, they have to show how they got it. Now, maybe they were very successful, speculating in real estate or something like that, but they have to show it. So, and, now the effect of that, if you, and in countries like Norway have something like that, the effect of that is a lot of people would probably leave. But if that's the goal, if you don't want those people in your city or in your country, then, just announce a source of funds audit and watch them run away very quickly. Sure.
Well, per capita, Vancouver is the luxury sports car capital of North America. There's Lamborghinis with beginner license plates.
Yeah,
who's funding them, and who are these kids, and where did they get the money?
I was walking down Burrard Street, and I think it was Burrard Street, and they have there's a Bentley, a Rolls Royce Bentley dealership, and they had 6 of them lined up ready to go, for delivery. Right? It's just unbelievable. You don't, and now the Tesla store is doing very well in Vancouver as well. So.
We'll talk about the Tesla story when we return.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Hilliard Macbeth. Hilliard, I guess maybe I'm due a commission from Tesla, because I remember a few years ago you were not happy with how much you had to pay to get your four-wheel drive vehicle serviced. And I said, if you had an electric car, the only fluid you have to replace is the windshield wiper fluid. But your response was a little different. You got yourself a Tesla. How's that worked out, and how is Tesla working out?
So for 3 years, I've had, and really, literally, it has been, there was one issue with a fan, and they have what's called the Ranger, and he's a mobile guy, comes around in a van. It's actually not a Tesla van, because they don't make them yet, so it's a gasoline-powered van. Brings the part, and right in your driveway, actually in our garage, he did it, but he could do it in the driveway, and he swaps out the defective part and puts a new one in, and that's the only issue I've had. And so I love it. And now my wife has the Model 3 that came out last year, so she's had hers for about 6 months. So far we've been really happy. And the range anxiety thing does fade after a while. You get used to it, and you learn how to plan ahead a little bit. So 2 things happened in Tesla this week. They had the Autonomy Day, where Elon Musk talked about how the progress is going towards full autonomy, where you wouldn't literally have to do anything. The car would drive itself. And then the second thing was they came out in Wednesday with their earnings after the market closed, and so they showed a loss on Wednesday, which was a loss after 2 quarters of profits, and their cash position was a little bit reduced, but they did buy back almost $1 billion worth of convertible debentures, so that were outstanding. So it looks like they're still in pretty good shape as far as cash goes. But the main reason for the loss was they have started to ship mostly Model 3s in volume to both Europe and China, and they're also constructing the Chinese plant. If you want to see, it's amazing. You know, when they started constructing the Chinese plant, which will produce batteries and Model 3s in January, they said it would be up and running by September, October, and unbelievable, right? That's impossible. Like in Vancouver, it would take two years to get the permits to build a building, and even before the construction started. Anyway, in China, apparently they can do things faster, because if you look on the internet, you'll see a picture of this thing, and it's actually, the building is starting to take shape, and it's April. I wouldn't be surprised if they actually meet the target of September, October. So, but it's still very controversial. I mean, they're in such a rapid expansion phase, they're not going to be able to show a profit every quarter. They did say that they would return to profit later this year, and they did say that they were going to ship or manufacture something like 300 to 400,000 cars this year, which is a little bit lower than what they've been saying before. I think at one time on Twitter, Elon Musk said by December it would be 500,000 cars, but he meant, I think, the production rate would be 500,000 in December, so on an annualized basis. So he got into a little bit of trouble for that on Twitter, but at any rate, it's with the new plant in Shanghai, and there's another new one contemplated either in California or in Nevada. A couple of years from now, they'll quite easily be at 1 million cars a year, which kind of makes it interesting, because if you figure a profit of, say, $5,000 a car, which maybe is too high, but the math is easy on 1 million cars, that's $5 billion. Put a 20 multiple on that, you've got a $100 billion company. So it's trading now for a little bit less than $50 billion. The stock's come down about 33% from the peak, which was hit about a year and a half ago.
Hilliard, thank you so much for being on the show.
Nice to be talking to you again.
My guest has been Hilliard Macbeth, author of the 2nd edition of the book, When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash. His website, macbethgroup.com. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at HowStreet, our YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. If you have questions for Hilliard or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.